and welcome back to Bookish Theories. In today's video, I would like to talk about TAEMIN's Criminal, focusing on a little breakdown and analysis of the concept, the lyrics, and the music video. Criminal is a song that deals with the themes of love, seduction, and obsession, that tells the story of a person who falls victim of a fatal attraction at the hands of a criminal who tortures them with their love. In the official statement that SM released for the comeback, the company actually defined the song as an audible thriller. And this is a very fitting definition for the track because, according to TAEMIN himself, Criminal is designed to be a visual and auditory experience meant to portray a moment of catharsis that foreshadows an inner transformation. You see, this time around, TAEMIN is exploring a moment of his life that represents the culmination of his career up to this point. But even if he's rightfully considered an inspiration for many idols in the industry, this project reflects on his personal journey and on his desire to keep going and never stop learning new things about his craft. Now, in order to express this idea of constant rebirth and transformation, Never Gonna Dance Again is a dual album divided into two different acts. The first act being about his rebellion against the ordinary and the process of finding a new ego, while the second one depicting the birth of a new self-identity. And even if for now Act 2 is still in production, Act 1 is the perfect representation of the first concept because in Criminal we see TAEMIN setting himself free through dancing, which is the craft that defines his identity and the medium through which he is able to transform himself. In contrast to the title of the album, which tells us that TAEMIN is never gonna dance again, Criminal shows us the exact opposite. And this contradiction is meant to show us that even if he's been in the industry for over a decade, he has no intention of stopping because he is still young and he is still growing. If life is all about movement, TAEMIN's desire for life is expressed through dancing. So the contrast between his promise to never dance again and him literally dancing through hell is a statement of rebellion that represents his determination to keep going and keep living. This new era basically portrays his journey to maturity and his transition to a new and more self-aware version of himself. And even if this transformation is not complete yet, Criminal portrays the first part of this journey by showing us TAEMIN in the process of setting himself free and rebelling against the norm. Now, in the video, this idea is perfectly conveyed through the different scenarios that we are being presented, because if on the one hand we see TAEMIN playing the role of a criminal who destroys a shop full of mannequins and actually suffocates in the toxic environment he is rebelling against, on the other he also plays the role of a prisoner stuck in a hellish limbo that is trying to escape. Now, at first glance, the symbolism of the video seems to be a bit obscure, but if we consider what TAEMIN himself has said about the concept, the visuals actually portray a process of death and atonement that is meant to set the scene for the rebirth that will take place in Act 2. You see, in order to understand what Criminal is all about, we have to keep in mind the two main themes of Act 1, which is the rebellion against the ordinary and the process of finding a new ego, because as it turns out, the video actually portrays both in a very subtle way. At the beginning, the video opens with TAEMIN starting to dance in hell while he is tied up and surrounded by red dancers wearing masks. Now, right off the bat, these visuals are very telling because the opening scene not only sets the mood for what is about to happen, but it also gives us a glimpse of the environment that TAEMIN is actually rebelling against. As we see him being escorted by a SWAT team and starting to dance on lava, TAEMIN is trapped and in a position of disadvantage. But as the song tells us, the love that put him in this position brainwashed him to the point that he accepts his situation and welcomes the torture. The love that TAEMIN is singing about is toxic and destructive, but even if the lyrics imply that he is an innocent victim who is completely controlled by it, the video subverts this idea by portraying TAEMIN as a criminal himself, thus suggesting that the end of his innocence overlaps with him becoming the very thing that destroyed him. As we'll see in a second, however, this loss of innocence is what allows him to rebel against the system and free himself from the leash that trapped him up to this point. And this idea is perfectly conveyed in the scene of the shop, where we see TAEMIN with a chainsaw and surrounded by plants and mannequins. Now this scene here is extremely interesting because in a way we can say that the vintage shop might actually represent the music industry that TAEMIN wants to rebel against, with the mannequins being the idols who have to conform to a strict beauty standard and the plants representing the wild nature of this environment. If you look closely, this is a shop that sells male, female and kid mannequins who are unique models with perfect details. And the audience is actually introduced to this world from the outside looking in, meaning that we are the customers that these products are meant for. Since this is a vintage shop, the idea here seems to be portraying the traditional perception that people have of the idols in the industry, which is that of perfect models rather than actual people. And to further reinforce this idea, initially we see TAEMIN facing the opposite way, so that we only pay attention to his expensive clothing, but we don't see his wounded face. This scene here is actually a great representation of the limited perspective that fans have on the life of an idol. Because even if from the outside we can see that this industry is a jungle, we often don't get to see how hurt these people actually are behind the scenes. This is an environment that is both painful and magnificent. It's dangerous but also alluring, and TAEMIN was a child when he became part of this world, so the love that came from this experience is also the source of his suffering. As the lyrics say, the moment he fell for this love was the end of his innocence, and the death of his innocence is actually portrayed on screen as well, where we see TAEMIN suffocating as a murder of crows awaits for his passing. Now this is a very powerful scene because crows are scavenger animals that feed on the bodies of the dead. So TAEMIN dying surrounded by crows could symbolize the predatory nature of the people in the industry and the public who feed off of the suffering and trauma that the idols have to endure. In the context of the video, however, the death of innocence is also associated to symbols of rebirth that are meant to foreshadow what is gonna happen in Act 2. And this idea is conveyed both through the butterflies, which are animals that symbolize transformation and rebirth, and through the imagery of TAEMIN petrified in a position that strongly recalls the crucifixion of Christ. Now, even if this is a very quick shot, in this context this analogy is extremely relevant because, much like the story TAEMIN is telling us here, in the Bible the story of Jesus is the story of an innocent who dies the death of a criminal and is eventually born again. And even if in this case TAEMIN is not reborn yet, the video shows the process of search that will lead him to this new self. If you look closely, as we see TAEMIN dancing his way to salvation, we not only see him freeing himself from the ties that keep him trapped, but we also see him looking over the model of a labyrinth, which implies that his new freedom also comes with a new determination to escape his personal hell and be born again. Sure enough, the first step towards this rebirth is exactly what happens next, because as we see TAEMIN petrified like Jesus on the cross, the setting changes and he moves from hell to a more neutral environment. Now, whether you want to see this new reality as purgatory or as a limbo of some kind, the symbolism here implies that his first death is actually allowing him to move on. The suffering he has endured because of this toxic love is awakening a new self that is now in the process of being born again. And this awakening is manifesting through a new self-awareness that is actually expressed in the scene of him poking the screen that divides him and the audience. You see, at this point, TAEMIN is completely aware of who he is and of his role in the eyes of the public. He is an innocent who feeds off of the love he receives, but also a criminal that endures the torture he is inflicting. And he is embracing this duality because it's part of the process of creating a new identity. Experiencing a first metaphorical death made him long for a new life, and this idea is also implied in the scene of the skeleton hand picking the card of the hourglass, because this type of imagery strongly recalls the concept of memento mori, which is a reminder of the inevitability of death that in turn can trigger a new appreciation for life. As TAEMIN himself has stated, Criminal does not portray the positive emotions associated to art, but rather a process that uses dancing as a medium of catharsis that foreshadows a transformation. So even if the video doesn't offer a resolution to his suffering, it does show us his escape from his personal hell and the beginning of his journey towards a new life. So that's it from me today. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you did, please think about liking and subscribing. As always, thank you so much for watching, guys. I'll see you next time. Bye bye.